We're on now.
Okay.
You're up and live.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Transforming Life webinar. We want to welcome those who are joining us on Zoom, on YouTube, and on Facebook. This afternoon, we will be looking at, in our Transforming Life series, Preparation for Marriage, Part 2. We have with us a very, very well knowledgeable panel to take us through this discourse, and they will be introduced to you at the appropriate time. We want to welcome our panelists this afternoon to this forum, and we're looking forward to a grand and great experience. We're asking everyone to be courteous and to be respectful of everyone's thoughts. At the last 20 minutes of this program will be geared towards questions and answers. So we're asking you to write your questions in the forum so that they can be put to the panel at the appropriate time. Before I introduce the panel to you, I would just like to let you know about an upcoming program that we're doing in 2 weeks time. And that program will speak to the whole matter of sex, and we're going to look at it in its entirety because there are some myths that are there and we want to make sure that those are clarified. I'll tell you what the full topic would be when that time comes, but I just want you to know that that is coming up in 2 weeks' time. This afternoon, our moderator is Mrs. Eileen Spence, my wife, for 32 years. She is a former school principal, so she's an educator and one who loves young people. She loves the fact that our lives need to be transformed, because without transformation in our lives, we're going to have a challenge. And that can also impact negatively on our spiritual life. And so this afternoon, she's going to be taking us through the discussion. So at this time, I'm going to ask Eileen to take over the discourse. Over to you, Eileen.
Thank you so much, Michael. Let me add my quote of welcome to everybody, and I'm sure you're looking forward to a lively discussion. Last week, we were really blessed by what took place, and I know you're looking forward to this evening's program after such a stimulating discussion led by Mrs. Renee Robertson. I must commend her and the panelists for a very informative and productive session, which I dare say has now landed me with this afternoon's responsibility. So now we have arrived at Preparation for Marriage, Part 2. We will start with a recap of the salient points of last week and move into covering as much additional ground as possible. If you have need for clarification on any issue discussed last week, please write into the chat, as well as whatever questions and comments you may have on the current program. I believe this discussion is inexhaustible, so I'm going to ask our counselors to provide us with accessible resources at the end of the program, whether books, websites. We are familiar with Adventist Home, which I think is the best. However, there are other areas that we might want to explore. So any other material that can be recommended by the counselors, we'll happily accept. Our panelists for this evening are, first of all, we have Mr. Philippe Laguerre, and he's an attorney at law and a member of the Conyers SDA Church. He is single and he sees himself as fun-loving and adventurous. We have Mr. Delroy Sparks, who is a teacher and Vice President of Spiritual Affairs for the Manchester Youth Federation. We also have Miss Vanessa Campbell. She was here last week and we welcome her back. She is also an attorney at law and a member of the Spanish Town Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, our specialists are Dr. or Mrs. Lorna Durant. She holds a PhD in Family Studies from the Texas Women's University, and she is also a certified family life educator. We have Dr. Curtis Fox, and he's a senior pastor of the Conyers Seventh-day Adventist Church, to which Mr. Laguerre belongs. And he is also Chief Executive Officer of the True Wellness Integrative Center. And our co-host is here also, Dr. Samuel. And he's a senior pastor of the Adventist Church and co-host of the Transforming Panelists. And we look forward to a rousing discussion. Now I'm going to start off with a brief recap of what we did last week, and I will be really brief because we need to move on with the discussion as early as possible. Preparation for marriage starts in the parental home, and this was established from the book Messages to Young People. Secondly, marriage is beginning of love and not the end of it. Also from Ellen G. White, Messages to Young People. Our single male and female guests expressed that they would like, what they would like in a partner. And that would include compatibility in personality, trust, faith in God, with a real spiritual connection. Because that doesn't always come along with what we say is our faith in God, or what we express to be faith in God. And that there should also be, along with trust, with a personality, trust in God, there should also be some amount of physical attraction. Persons contemplating marriage should have dependence on God for direction. Despite pressures that young people face, early marriages are discouraged by Ellen White. It was pointed out that among our churches, we have persons who will try to pressure you. When are you going to get married? What's going on? What's happening? Well, Sister White counsels us not to rush into it. Early marriages before the proper mental development takes place in persons might result in disaster. Persons should take time to live independently so they can evaluate and understand themselves, so they can understand the kind of person, also so they can understand the kind of person they want to marry. The biblical foundation for marriage was also established. The Bible says it's not good that man should be alone, and God himself provided a companion. Intimacy was also endorsed in Songs of Solomon, Dr. Fox, and also by Paul in the New Testament in his letters to the Corinthians, Hebrews, and the Ephesians. But Paul stated that he remained single for the gospel's sake. It was also reiterated that the family was established for the perpetuity of human race. Another area that was looked at was emotional intelligence. And that was identified as a must, as persons need to understand their emotional needs and learn to govern their emotions, as well as develop sensitivity to the emotional needs of others of a prospective spouse. Financial stability was pointed out as a must, as essential to the success of marriage. The financial values and habits of a prospect should be taken into consideration. As such, it is prudent to have such discussion and agreement on how they will arrive at financial unity. In many instances, the family budget may be required to extend to facilitate the needs of the extended family where possible, and couples must consult and agree on such expenditures. If individuals are not comfortable having joint account from the outset, they should likely reconsider their decision, as there is a trust factor here. There was a segue into sexual activity of partners, and that they should have common agreement on various aspects of satisfying each other's desire. And this is a very interesting one. The all-important point was emphasized that should there be objection from one spouse to a desire expressed by the other, and they continue into marriage, it could lead to dissatisfaction and infidelity because the need of that person is not met. Counseling is needed before final decision is made on a marriage partner. God must be included from the beginning. And it's also important to generalize before specializing, as generalizing provide wider options. Lastly, it was stated that the focus went to prenuptial agreements, and it was said that this should not really be considered favorably among Christians, as it has implications of mistrust. I hope I did a good recap, Dr. Bulgin, Dr. Fox, and panelist, my single, Sister Campbell.
Yes. Sorry, Madam Moderator, could you tilt your camera down a little bit? There you go.
It keeps going back up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, that's better. That's better.
Okay. Great. Yeah, proceed. Now, my first questions, and in the event someone wants to zero in back on anything we did last week, it's okay. We will do that towards the end of the program. Just post your question and we will pick up in the chat and we will pick up on it. Now I'm going to direct my first questions to the singles. And Mr. Laguerre, what is your perspective on marriage? What is your perspective on marriage?
Yeah, that's a broad question. I guess when I think about marriage, for me, I agree with what you said in Genesis 2 when God looked on Adam and said, it's not good for man to be alone. I think that one of the deepest desires of humankind is to know, to be known, to love, and to be loved. And I think that marriage is a fulfillment of that natural desire that God has given us. But I also think in a spiritual sense that God has a purpose for each person. There's certain people that each one of us is supposed to reach, to minister to, and so on and so forth. And being with the right person, being aligned with the right person can either allow you to reach these goals that God has for your life, or can completely derail you if you're with the wrong person. And so I think marriage is there for us to become more selfless, to teach us how to truly love with that agape love that God wants us to love each other, It's there to meet a really real physical need that we have. And it's there to help us on our spiritual journeys. So that's kind of how I view it.
I like that because you said the question is wide. It's wide, but it tells much about who you are. So I ask it that way. And we will move on. I'm sorry. We will move on to Mr. Sparks. Please share with us your perspective.
Well, my perspective on marriage, as my friend said earlier, it's a very broad topic. It comes with a lot, and that is why it is advised that before we even think about getting into a relationship, we must understand the different levels thereof, dating, courting, before we even go to marriage. And so, because could somebody mute that mic, please?
If it is a case where I am being blamed for
Hello? Right, good. So marriage now is a place where you find yourself with somebody that you plan to spend the rest of your life with. My friend gave you some aspects, but I would like to go into some that he didn't mention. It is an institution created by God for all human, and we must, indulge in this institution. We have to know ourselves before we even think of trying to be with somebody or spend the rest of our lives with somebody. It's all about learning. There's no book for marriage. There's no relationship book. It's just for you to, it's a trial and error situation, but you have to put yourself in a position where you have to learn to compromise and give and take.
You said it's a trial and error situation. What do you mean? Because if you marry, it's supposed to be for keeps. So at what point do you try and err?
In the sense, when I say trial and error, I mean that there's no perfect marriage, and you cannot go in there expecting that you did a course in it and you're gonna have flying colors and everything will be okay and it will be smooth sailing. You'll have times where you'll attempt something and you realize that for the betterment of you and your partner, this is not how it's supposed to go, and so you'll have to turn back, correct yourself, and then go back with a different perspective and a different drive.
Okay. Miss Campbell.
So my perspective, I'm here. My perspective is somewhat similar. The only thing that I would add to what was said before is that it also accounts for the things that you bring. So all of the things that you have been working on, the things that you are trying to become more secure about within yourself, it brings your level of security, it brings your level of honesty, your level of loyalty. So all of those things that you've been working on leading up to marriage, it brings those things to the fore. So it shows the quality of person too that you are, and I'm not sure if that has been enough of a focus. The quality of who you are, your character, your character. It really does come to the forefront in marriage. So I think it really is a true test. So that is my perspective.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm going to ask you to go a step further, one step further. You are all single at this point in time. Based on what on your responses so far and what I heard from you last week, Ms. Campbell, I believe you all agree that I can draw the conclusion that you hope to get married sometime soon or sometime in the future, right? Sometime in the future.
Yeah.
No, please describe for me some characteristics and values that would make you a good prospect.
And that would make me a
Just
good
briefly,
prospect.
just briefly,
Sure,
maybe
sure.
2 sentences or so.
All right, I think that's some characteristics you said that would make me a good spouse.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Yes, yes.
First, I would say honesty. I would say good communication skills. And I'd also say trust. Yeah, those would be my 3. I'll leave the rest for the others.
Okay, so that's what you have to offer. That's what you have to bring. And I guess persons are hearing. I don't know if she has anyone as yet, but especially when it comes on to the financial aspect, we like to know, and fidelity, persons like to know that they can trust you, that you're an honest person. Thank you so much. What about Mr. Laguerre?
So as far as what I bring to the table, for one, I have a heart that truly desires God, in the sense that I'm not interested in playing church. I'm not interested in just playing for the praise team or doing something. Like, when it comes down to verses in the Bible that say that God will give you peace and he'll give you joy, I'm interested in applying that in my real life situations. And so I really do feel like I have a heart that seeks to please God and honor God with my life and my habits. So that's a double-edged sword at the same time, because it kind of weeds out everyone else that I don't get that from, right? Like, I'm not trying to unite with someone who I don't feel really has a connection with God or a desire to connect with God. And then I'm transparent. I'm the type of guy who'll meet someone on a train, and by that time we're off, we know each other's life stories. So I mean, but I think that's a good thing to bring to marriage. And you know, once I set my eye on a target, for the most part, I'm pretty hardworking. But yeah, I don't know. That's it.
So strong spiritual leadership and, you know, being a good provider. I like that. Okay, and we move on to Mr. Parks.
Yes, I'm the kind of person, I'm a people person, a very jovial person. I see myself as one who is always standing in the gap for others, being there for people. Sometimes, most of the times, I'm the kind of person who you can talk to about any and everything and rest assured that it will stay between us. I'm a good advisor, and also I try as best as possible to maintain that spiritual relationship that I have with my Lord.
Okay, thank you so much. And these are essential qualities that most women look for. Well, all women, I think, Christian women look for in a man. All right, last week, we kind of touched on an area that I also think is very important. It was asked in the chat, and it is about sexuality. So what I'm looking for, Dr. Fox, is a comprehensive definition of sexuality. Does it contribute in any way to one's aura or the atmosphere, whatever we exude to others? What bearing does it have on the kinds of individual to whom we are attracted and who we might attract to us? So all of this, Dr. Fox, I'd like you to work on for me, because I think it has some importance. It has real relevance to this topic we are discussing.
I think in the way in which the question struck me, that it's a comprehensive understanding or presentation of somebody. Think about it. I think that sexuality, when we use it in the context of part of the attraction necessary, maybe we are saying that this person is attractive and this person gives an aura that they there would be a blessed presence around somebody, and which would include the physical, which comes with attraction. So when you talk about theories of dating and mating and so on, I think one of the ideas is sexual stimulus role value theory. But I think this is an attempt to sort of explain the comprehensive nature of attraction. So it's not just a sexual, but it is partly that. It has to do with values. That's and right. It has to do with roles. Right. That's right. So in that comprehensive analysis, I think when you see somebody, it sort of telegraphs something. It says this person is warm, inviting, is awesome, communicates well, draws out your personality, and so I think it's not just a sexual attraction, even though we might say this person is really sexually attractive. In some cases, the individual may focus just on that, but usually I think what we are talking about is a comprehensive assessment of somebody, which involves the roles and the values and the sexual attractiveness that this person has for us. I mean, I could say more about that, but that's basically how I think the question struck me. Am I on target with what you're thinking here?
I agree, Dr. Fox, and I'd like to hear if Dr. Bulgin and if Dr. Bulgin has anything to add to that.
I yield to the honorable gentleman from Conyers. No, yeah. Sexuality is defined really by God and by community. And what one individual, what one person finds to be sexual might not be to the other. So in the sense of this comprehensive approach to who the other person is, what the person brings to the table makes that person very attractive or unattractive. It's the personality, it's the physicality, it's the inner person that comes to the table, that strikes you as this whole person that is just phenomenal. I think that sexuality, as it is when narrowly viewed as just intimacy or sexual attractiveness, is a limiting factor, but it's a broad scope of the total person, what he or she brings to the table.
Okay, great. Dr. Durant.
I agree with what the both doctors have said so far. Sexuality is a very broad concept. It involves the biological, the emotional, the physical, the spiritual, the social, your behaviors. It's how you express sexual feelings and how you experience sex. It has to do with attraction too, but like I think Dr. Bulgin was saying, what is attracted to one person will not be attracted to another. So for one person, the physical will be what is sexual to somebody else. Somebody else might be attracted to someone else because of their spiritual life and how spiritual they are, and that is sexual to them, or their mind, the way they can expound on something, they might find that very sexual, more so than the physical aspect of the person. So it's very broad, and it's just what we use to connect. I think somebody said that, to the other person. And it can be from the physical to the spiritual to the behaviors that the person does. Are they romantic?
Yes. Thank you so much. I really ask this question because there are many times there are discussions that include sexuality. However, we tend not to elaborate enough on sexuality, but on sex itself. And I believe that it has a lot of bearing on how we communicate, what we communicate, how we perceive ourselves, how we dress, you know, and that is where we end up attracting persons to ourselves and who we attract. For example, we have some young men these days who dress in unusual ways. You see so many garments exposed, and that would not necessarily attract Dr. Durant, right? They wouldn't. Okay, so this involves a broad aspect of who we are. To what extent?
I'm sorry, just before you move on,
okay.
Just to highlight one of the difficulties that I would say exists in discussing the topic of sexuality is really that it means different things to different people. So as we've discussed, it's going to be that what I find attractive is not necessarily what you will find attractive. So it's an unusually broad topic because there's so many different opinions about it. So I think that too is a limitation in discussing it.
Okay, great. Anybody else would like to make an input? Okay. To what extent does sexuality influence the success of the marriage relationship? Would you be able to relate to that one for me, Dr. Bulgin?
Certainly. Fundamentally, let's begin with the whole question of sex. Fundamentally, God invented sex, and it functions on multiple levels. Number one, it is a natural desire. It's a natural experience that we all gravitate towards. However, going into marriage simply to satisfy the sexual drive is insufficient to maintain relationship over a long period of time, because we get accustomed to and we become familiar with, and so there is a part of us that like something new, something different, and so while that is important, it cannot be and it should not be the only driving force to get into a relationship. Someone said to me a while ago that you can find sex anywhere, but finding a partner, finding a life's partner requires more than just the availability of sex. Sex is not just designed to satisfy a physical need, but it is designed to communicate on a higher level, communicating love to the person or to your spouse, to the one loved. And if you're not communicating love in the process of satisfying that need, then you've missed the point, you've missed the boat, and you're merely functioning like an animal. At the heart of meaningful, lasting relationship, however, is sexuality, and that means that, like Ellen White says, we are to study each other, how to enhance the happiness and the well-being of each other, and it is an ongoing process. It's dynamic, it's fluid. What satisfied yesterday, what makes the person happy yesterday might not make the person happy today. So this constant studying and understanding one's mate and a willingness to do that is helpful in building a strong and lasting relationship. And there are a number of other things that we could put in there, but I am whetting the appetite of our listeners to help you to understand that it's not just one thing. It's not just marriage really leads us to the point where it starves selfishness. We cannot have a lasting relationship if we're going into it simply to satisfy our own desires and our own needs, but it has to be a family goal-oriented experience where we have something bigger than ourselves that we're working towards. And sexuality fits into that, but it's not the only thing.
If I can
Great.
add something, I have some,
Yeah.
this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. So oftentimes in talking to married couples, I'm not married, of course, but when I talk to some couples, they've told me, looks don't matter. After 5 years of marriage, you almost forget what the person looks like. It's about how they treat you, it's about how they talk to you. And that has proved very harmful for me in this way. When Adam in Genesis 2, when God brought Eve to Adam, right? He said, "This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh." And so there was no negotiating, there was no praying and fasting to be attracted to Eve. He did not struggle. It was an impulsive limbic response to seeing this woman. And he was like, yo, she bad, like straight up. So the reality is that a lot of men that are sincere in their walk struggle with that. And I've known a lot of men that feel as if being that attracted to their wife is almost like not a sin, but it's like, because I'm following God, God is gonna hook me up with this girl who's just like in sackcloth and ashes, and but her heart is pure, and like, so like that's like my cross that I have to bear. And it's just like, no, like bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. And I've entertained some situations in the past where I had no business entertaining it, because I was trying to test the limits of maybe God is calling me here, even though I'm not fully there, right? On the attraction level. And for me, I feel like if I'm attracted to someone as a man, like godly men are still men, right? Like, and that's the thing, that's the message I'm trying to get out there. Just because we serve God does not mean we don't appreciate beauty. And it's important for us to be honest with ourselves. Like, what do I like, Phil? What do you like, so and so, right? Like, and be honest with that, because God is the one that's giving you those desires about what you like in a woman. And we try to force the action. I think it's harmful, because when you're really into someone, it helps on every level, like solving problems, nothing matters. She does this, it doesn't matter, because you're crazy about the person, right? And I think that's really important in picking a spouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what it is, what is it that drives you crazy?
So that's in my prayer journal. And but I mean, I know when I see it. I mean, you just know when there's a spark, when you talk to the person, you see them. Yeah.
There is this visualness. We perceive things, and I think I said last week that the funnel shape that we should have in prior to marriage is like this, where we have a wide circle of friends, and we are always operating with the notion, this hidden agenda. I know what I'm looking for. I have a sense of what I'm looking for in a mate. And when you begin to see those things and you begin to narrow the group, society really works against that anyhow, because we find middle school kids specializing, we have high school kids specializing, we have first and second year college students specializing, and they go through their lives specializing without having really denying themselves of choice. Choice means you're pulling something from several options, but you have to have a baseline. And I think, as you rightly said, you have established that baseline. It's in your prayer journal. Only God knows that you're not putting it out there, because folks will have a way to act or to perform, act as if they have all that stuff because they like your smile, or they like the way you walk, or they like your eyes. But you've got to be married to more than just a smile, or just eyes, or just, shape, or something like that. It is that essentially, who is this person? Mm-hmm. Because that's what is important. Yes, beauty is fine, but you can find a lot of beautiful women or handsome men who have no values, no morals, no basis. And if that's absent, all you have is a shell. And you want God can bring the beauty, the physical beauty and attractiveness together with the spiritual.
I'll interject here to say, before anyone else comments, I love a term that you use here, or a description, Dr. Bulgin. Marriage starves selfishness. I love that. And I hope our listeners are taking note. Of course, we're a bit selfish at the beginning because we are looking for someone who pleases us. Selfishness there is fine. But after you have found that person, you have to be willing to share, to understand. And I must commend Mr. Laguerre. He described himself initially as someone who is sincere, and I find it coming out in his response. So I love that, Mr. Laguerre. Now, is there anyone else who would like to make a comment on that part, sexuality and marriage, how it influences the relationship? If not, Dr. Fox.
Well, I could say, just because the word sex has fallen into bad company, when we talk about sexuality, it maybe throws off the bigger idea, I think, right? Because it has to do with sexuality. In my mind, is the interaction between sexes, what people find fascinating with one another.
That's right.
So and that fascination has something to do with sexual mating, but it also has to do with some broader ideas, just as we're all saying. But I just wanted to underline that I feel like that is important. So the look of the eyes may not just say this person is sexy, but it communicates something. This person has an endearing look that draws me in, the way they talk to me, the way they listen, the way I am able to talk to them, the freedom with which I can somehow creates something. The fact that this person would allow me to have a life where I'm in touch with God is like part of this attraction as well, and on and on and on. So that's why I would just want to underline it's broad, but we have downplayed sexual attraction in the past, I think. We must confess. We communicated to young people that this person has to look like, Ellen White. And of course, you know what I mean when I say that. It has to look that certain way. And if they don't, then we think that their values are suspicious. And I don't necessarily think that was the right thing to communicate, but that came with negative attitudes towards sexuality as well. So we were communicating, you had to cover it all up. You had to cover up all things sexual and sensual. And I think that does despite to the creation of God, who, when he made, just as Phil was saying, when he made Eve and brought her to the man, he was enamored by her. Nothing is wrong with that. That is a good. But if you put 10 people in a room, if you selected them well, 10 of them could be awesome and beautiful and sexy. So why this one? Why this woman? Why is it just the sexiness? No, it's something more than that. It's something that is perceived to be more enduring than that. It is something that is more total than that. But they're all lumped into the same package that makes this person the one you want and the one you want to spend the rest of your life with and you will commit to. I think that gets played out too in some ways.
Yes, it's all about the whole person.
Yeah.
Not just one aspect. Great. Anyone else would like to say anything on the matter before we move on? I'm seeing the comments coming in and so forth, and we appreciate it so much. I will read one or two of the comments, but the questions we will take at the end. Coming from Heather, I believe we should be honest with attractiveness and also willing to accept the natural changes in life as we go on. And Marsha says, God wants to give us the desires of our heart. Ask for what you want. I love that, Marsha. I remember the times when I was afraid to ask God because of how I perceived him, but he wants the best for us. And Heather totally agrees. No, York Douglas says, as a male, I know we are wired differently from females. The challenge is the balance between self and what God has in mind for us. But it means I must trust him wholly to guide me to that partner for life. We have been cultured to look at the opposite sex through tainted eyes, true, family values, and our own life experiences. That one I'm not so clear on. But we as well, the lesson last week said we are to see others through the eyes of God, but it also means we are to see persons for who they are. And we have ideals within ourselves, and we would like to see that reflected in the person we are choosing. Now, we are going to shift to another question. Is there any way, and this is for Dr. Fox, is there any way to determine, others will be able to come in just the same, but I'm directing it to Dr. Fox first. Is there any way to determine sexual compatibility with the prospective spouse? We have had some stories about puss in bag and so forth, and so some of us want to move beyond God's ideal for us to leave that for marriage. So how can we uncover that? And I'm also going to ask Dr. Durant to come in on that as well.
Yeah, so every now and then I maybe jokingly say that, yes, you shouldn't buy cat and bag, as we say. But more marriages break up over money than over sex. So if you want to share something before marriage, you could start with your checkbook, and that might be a good way to get to know somebody very well. But
please mute your mic. Someone's mic is open. They're getting the sounds.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. So, okay. So, but the idea is, I believe if you have open conversations with somebody and interactions, and you allow the conversation to flow freely without encumbering it with unnecessary and or undue questions too early, this person will communicate with you much of what you need to know about them if you're open. If you enter into a relationship and before long you are talking about, are you dating? Are you seeing anybody? How come you're not married? What kind of person are you looking for? It would not be long before you would close the door in terms of your ability to get to know what this person is really like. Because right away, they will begin to act, to perform in ways to draw you in. To me, if you have a friendship for itself's sake and you are not too vested in the outcome, you could listen to this person and see, what do they talk about? How do they talk about it? How do they talk about themselves, their jobs? Are they happy in the way in which they express their experiences in life? Do they love work? Are they loving and kind and generous? If you listen to somebody without encumbering the ground, and you have a few hours of great conversation, you will get to know a lot about this person for free. But a lot of times we are so invested that we miss the communication between peoples. And I would say, yes, you could get to understand something about the sort of sexual nature and energy of this person. And you don't have to do that by having sex. I mean, that might be the furthest thing from your mind, but you will get some ideas as to how close this person is, how they talk, the kind of relationship that they are likely to have. You could never know everything for sure, but you will get some good ideas because they will be telling you if you are listening. And I feel a lot of times we're not listening. Having said that, could you know everything about somebody? Maybe not. So one of the books I read with my students, it's a book called The Passionate Marriage. The first chapter is entitled, that's by David Snatch, by the way, Nobody is Ready for Marriage. Marriage makes you ready for marriage. That's the title of the first chapter. So as Ellen White says, yeah, you could prepare and so on, but you are going to enroll in a school for which you would never graduate. So you'll be learning.
Sorry, please repeat that book.
It's called The Passionate Marriage by David Snatch, S-C-H-N-A-R-C-H. David Snatch. Yeah. Yeah, S-C-H-N-A-R-C-H, David Snatch. The Passionate
Marriage.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, one could also read The Sexual Crucible and Resurrecting Sex. But I think that's the truth. You may not know everything, and you maybe cannot know everything, but you got to allow your minds to be open, your level of awareness. You should not be blinded by love. Love is blinding. Love is not blind, but it sure is blinding, as I say sometimes. But if you try all kinds of sexual investments early in the relationship, it will cloud your mind, and you would lose your ability to really do the best and most honest assessment of this person in their totality.
Dr. Fox, I love that which you said. You can pick up on a person's energy, whether they are happy, they are generous, they are optimistic, their approach and attitude to life can tell you the kind of person you're dealing with. It is, I agree 100% with that. Anyone else would like to weigh in on that? Anything else you'd like to add?
I agree 100% that you can determine compatibility without doing anything.
Right.
And I think he said energy, and something that we like to talk about is chemistry.
Right.
You can determine a chemistry with someone just by the way that person looks at you. And that can make you feel something inside. So you know that there's that level of compatibility. Spending time with the person is very important. The more you spend time with them, talk with them, you see things, as Dr. Fox was saying, that kind of helps you to see how they would be in all areas of their life, including the sexual aspect of it. And last, I mean, God is a good God. He invented sex. You don't have to test it out to know if it is good. If it gave you that person, it will be amazing.
Great. He made us. Dr. Bulgin looks like he has something to say.
One additional point is that I'm pulling a verse from David. It said, "We're fearfully and wonderfully made."
Amen.
And we don't have to physically try out the anatomy of the other person to determine whether or not we want to spend the rest of our lives with this person. If a woman can give birth to a child, it tells you the potential that is there. God made us that way, and why should we think that we have to go there before we need to go there?
If I could add something to that.
Go ahead.
So for me, what I look for when it comes to that is along the lines of what Dr. Bulgin and Dr. Fox have mentioned. People tell you who they are if you just listen. So if someone says, I don't like physical touch, I mean, listen up, like to what degree don't you like physical touch? I mean, when I'm talking about the 5 love languages, so words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and gifts. And so if someone says, hey, I hate physical touch, I don't like when anyone hugs me, I don't like when anyone touches, like if that's the person's vibe, then that's, look into that, see how far that goes, right? If someone talks about some trauma, or they open up, and they share with you, just keep your eye out, see what the effects of that are, and see how they're dealing with it. But like, I think people do tell you, if someone is really touchy-feely before marriage, I don't think that when they get married, all of a sudden they're just going to be like a cat. So yeah, I think if we listen to what people are putting out, we'll be able to tell how someone is in the marriage bed, because ultimately it's just an extension of who they are before. So
great. We are looking at preparation for marriage, and these are things that we have to bear in mind. And again, Dr. Bulgin used an interesting term. A person's anatomy is not something you try out. We're not shopping for a dress or something like that. So you try it on and you put it off and so forth. No, it's something to do with the mind and the energy coming from the person. It is, and this is why we had to deal with sexuality this evening, because it is so much of what we are. God made us, and he made us sexual beings, whether or not we want to look at it in that way. And also, Dr. Fox, you mentioned earlier something about the dowdy dress, like a person has to cover up every single thing. We are not saying, ladies who are listening in, that we are going to expose up ourselves needlessly. So I'm sure Dr. Fox means modest dressing, but it should not be dowdy. It should still be attractive. We all agree, right? Yes. Okay.
And I would like to add, but when you do get married, it is okay to show what you want to show.
Thank you.
When you are married.
Yeah, and I am happy you brought that up, because sometimes you hear some things that are kind of different about what women want to do and what they don't want to do, and the challenge they pose to their husband, and the lights have to be out and that kind of thing. So thank you for bringing that into the mix. Adam and Eve wore light, but Adam saw enough to say, "Ooh, man!" All right, right? Yes. Okay. To what extent? This is very important. People are looking towards getting married, they are courting and so forth. And we have, later on, we are going to talk about baggage. So let me leave that for later on. In part one, the imperatives of shared values was discussed. What are the ways that one can go about understanding, and we have spoken about values here. What are the ways we can go about understanding the values of an individual apart from what they say? That is, how can you go beyond that, what they say, to uncover hidden values or lack of it? How can we do that?
All right, I'll take a stab at that. So I find that in a lot of or new relationships, there's a kind of short circuiting that happens. You spend a lot of time, yes, talking, but at that point in time, you're presenting the best version of yourself. The way, to my mind, of ensuring that you assess this person's values carefully and attentively is to do it over time. And that over time may not necessarily include what they say to you only, or cannot include what they say to you only. It has to include your observations of how they interact with their family members. It has to include your observation of how they interact with persons in their church. You listen carefully to their description of how their day was in terms of how they interact with their co-workers, because you may not end up in that space to make that assessment for yourself. But it is a process of observation that you have to be patient with. And it's not all the time that something happens that you're going to interject and say, why you did that. Sometimes you just need to listen to it and make that assessment to yourself personally and privately, and continue to do it over time, and don't skimp on it. Like, if you have an opportunity to be around that person and their friends, or persons who are not familiar with you, you are just around them and their friends. That's a good opportunity to assess their values. You watch how they treat other women too, who they're not necessarily friends with, or there are just so many opportunities, and those opportunities you can make the best use of once you are spending time with that person.
Great. So what you're saying, if you pick up cues that something is off in their interaction with other persons, even though they are quite good and everything with you, it is likely that is going to arise later on, especially when the novelty has worn off. That's what you're saying.
Right?
Great.
Definitely. And I mean, even we place a lot of emphasis on, for instance, women will look at how a man treats his mother or his sisters. That is something that okay, I need to look for that. But what about how he treats persons who are less privileged than he is? So people who can't return favors that he does for them, how does he interact with persons? Like, that's very important to look at. Especially if you're a person who you come from a background of always giving, or always, your service is something that you enjoy. That for me is something very important. I will look for that. How does he treat somebody who begs money on the side of the road? Do you dismiss the person? Do you greet the person good afternoon? Do you treat them like a human being? That is something that I think is very key to look at. And we miss opportunities to do those things when we short circuit that dating, that getting to know process.
Okay. Anyone else would like to comment on that? Would add anything?
Could I?
Go ahead, Dr. Fox.
Somebody else. But okay.
Dr. Fox, yes.
But, okay. So I say, don't listen to what people are telling you. Listen to what they're showing you.
Okay.
So don't have, I really believe this, don't have too many conversations about these things early in life. Just observe. And you will learn a lot. So just let it unfold like that. Observe. Your job is to observe, not to discuss. So why do you want me to pay, or why do you want me or think that I should pay for you in the restaurant? Don't have that conversation. Just observe. He invited you to eat, and now he is looking for you to pay. Then you are learning something. Just accept the learning experience and say, good, this is very great information for me, and on and on. Just observe how he treats, how he calls, how he looks at the waiter, and how he talks with her. How does he ask for the hot sauce, so to speak? All those things are opportunities to learn, and you will get enough information. You don't have to hire a private investigator for that one. He will let you know, she will let you know what he or she is like.
An interesting one, how he looks at the waiter or waitress. If his eyes follow, then you know whether he has wandering eyes, or if there's disdain, or that kind of thing. I like that. So there are many things that can come from it. Dr. Bulger?
No, you had someone who wanted to say something. I think, yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
Yes. As much as you can observe, we have to have an open mind that we also have perfect pretenders. And as much as you can see, and that's why it is good for us to spend quality time with partners. And that's why dating is very important, because in dating you spend quality time, and in dating the person can pretend, but for how long? You know what I mean? They can tell you this. You see them acting out, but there are some times when you can just catch them, because they can pretend for so long, but at some time the pretending game will catch up on them. So it's just for you to ensure that you spend good time in dating and observing, because you have perfect pretenders that will catch you and catch you off guard if you're not focused.
So you don't meet someone and marry in 9 months?
Not at all.
It depends. It depends. It depends. It depends.
Okay.
If you know what it is that you're looking for, and you see it, it doesn't take you forever to see what you're looking for, if it's there. I can tell you in my personal experience that from day one to days end, it was a year. I met my wife in July, and we were married in July of the next year. Within a few months, we made the decision. In fact, when we shared the idea that we were interested in each other, she was totally blown away. She said, "You better go pray and ask the Lord if this is what you want." And I would go pray and ask the Lord if this is what is for me. And a lot of times, and go, I know that it is not, we're not gods. But if we go back to the beginning, God knows what we want. And if God brings that person into our lives, it doesn't take forever for him to reveal that to us. It's when we don't know what we want that we need to take forever. And we go through a trial and error process. And we see this person, we get attracted to this person, we spend 6 months, 9 months with this person and say, okay, well, that's not the one. Let me flip over here. And going back to what you say, Sister Spence, they have wandering eyes. When the eyes are wandering, it means that they're not at rest. They still think that there is something in the rearview mirror that I need to look at. It means they're not completely satisfied with what they see before them.
Yes.
And it's been, we have rightly said that marriage is not, there no ideal marriage. Relationships are dynamic and fluid. When you start growing in the relationship, you begin to develop regrets. You begin to harbor thoughts of boredom. You've got to keep focusing on keeping it fresh and vibrant and alive, studying each other, changing to meet the changing seasons of life, And when you do that, it's gonna be different, It's gonna be different.
Yes, for sure.
Also, Dr.
Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah.
It's also important that as we venture into these activities, that we keep God in the center, and allow him to lead you. When you allow him to lead you, then he'll lead you into the right path. But when you depend on yourself and your own intellect and your own experience to guide you, then you'll always have problems.
Okay.
Correct.
And just before we leave that point, I'd like to go back to what Delores said earlier about there being perfect pretenders, because it is a reality and one that we have to bear in mind. But I think there are ways to mitigate against it as well. I saw persons making reference to long distance dating in the chat. That is one way of mitigating against avoiding that situation where possible, or at least until a stage in a relationship where the relationship is mature enough to deal with the difficulties concerning distance. But I think too, another way to mitigate against it that we don't necessarily dwell on is by simplifying the dating process. A lot of us view dating as going out and doing things. What about the interactions with the family? Sometimes dating may very well involve multiple Sunday afternoons at your house with your family or my house with my family. That eliminates the prospect of me being a pretender with you, because the people in my house know who I am. The people in your house know who you are. So where I make it a part of my expectations for dating that you will interact with the people that I love, that is a form of vulnerability that I'm not sure if we place enough emphasis on it in the dating process. You have to be willing to let that person into your space, because ultimately, if it is that the dating process leads to where you want it to, the marriage is going to be a marriage of families. Your family is coming together with theirs. So I think too, that is one of the ways to mitigate against that perfect pretender situation, by being more vulnerable, opening your world inclusive of your loved ones, because that allows you a check in terms of you being more authentic. And when you allow yourself to engage their family that way, it gives them the same check, allowing them to be more authentic with you.
Great point, Vanessa. I like that. It is really important for them to be, for persons considering marriage or, you know, some long-term relationship, or at least considering the person as an intended, to spend time with family, or if you don't have family around, with your good friends, friends you can trust. Come in your circle of acquaintance. That is good. And we have Marsha saying how he or she reacts when he or she is upset is an important indicator of who you are dealing with. It is important to spend time in natural setting, not always made up situation where you are both dressing the part. And Claudette is saying, be subtle as you activate your matlock skills. Ask questions of persons in their circle without displaying interest. If possible, visit their environment, their village, their town, wherever they are coming from. And Yvonne says, wow, I would not make a broad statement, such a broad statement about long distance relationships not being real anyway. Just a difference in opinion. But we are going to move on because we have some interesting areas to cover. How appropriate is it to discuss ideas for raising a family during courtship? Is this important? How many persons really engage in that? Is that really important? Such things as whether and when you will be thinking of having children, what you can do to ensure, sorry, I just missed yes, the kind of discipline we will use, how or what form of education, household chores, that kind of thing. How appropriate is it to discuss these nitty-gritties in during courtship? Anyone can take that question.
It is very important, very, very important. And that is why I always am a person who believes in the olden tradition of dating and courting. This society does not believe in that for whatever reason, but I'm from the old school and I believe in that. I will forever believe in that. When you avoid that and you don't do all of those stuff, when you find yourself being married, it's gonna cause a lot of problems, because one person is gonna say, this is what I want, this is all I've dreamt about, my children going to a private school, and the other person is gonna say that is not priority, right? And then nobody will find ourselves now arguing, going back and forth, and nobody is willing to compromise and to step down and to say, okay, let's do this. But when you do it prior to getting married, then we'll come to one conclusion, one common ground, one great spot, and then we'll have it all sorted out and we'll have smooth sailing as it relates to children and our family life.
Okay, in addition to that, you can have a situation where the gentleman wants 10 children and the wife wants 2. What do? You know, it's 8 more than 2. So to be in the same ballpark in terms of the size of family is also an important thing to talk about and discuss. Because if you don't, what if you want all of these children and let's say the man doesn't want any children or the woman doesn't want any children? When that happens, you have the makings for conflict and disappointment in the marriage. So yes, you should talk about the size of the family. You should talk about mode of discipline. You should talk about the education. In fact, it's a God-given responsibility to train and nurture and educate the next generation. And the next generation should be able to stand on the shoulders of the present generation. So if you're just barely surviving, you are not in a place to bring the next generation into a barely surviving situation, because you are then making their lives difficult. Children don't ask to be here.
Right.
They come as a result of two people loving and caring about each other and preparing for the next generation. That's a God-given responsibility. And that's why I think God says that if you don't take care of your family, you're worse than an infidel. So if you cannot take care of a family, you're not ready for marriage.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fox and Mr. Sparks.
I-
Dr. Bulgin. Sorry.
Thank
Yes.
you very much.
Yes. Someone
I
was
had a
about
yes, Vanessa. I just
Vanessa.
wanted to add another dynamic, or just basically another layer to that question. So we agree that it is necessary to have these kinds of discussions, but at what stage in the process, or how soon is too soon, how late is too late, for discussions like these.
Have it at the point when you can still change your mind.
And Dr. Bulgin, I'm going to dovetail in on that section, because last week you made a statement, you made a point that there are many times couples come to you for counseling and you pick up on cues that tell you that they are not compatible, but it has gone so far, it doesn't make sense. You try to tell them otherwise. So based on that and this observation that was made by Vanessa, at what point do persons really start receiving counseling?
Ideally, it should happen before you set the date, before you make the announcement. It is. I would say again, it is unfortunate that sometimes the pastor or the marriage counselor is the last person to hear about it. They come. It's almost like an afterthought. And so when a couple comes, one of the first things I ask, have you set a date? And they will, if they have, they will say, oh yes, we have, it's, down the road sometime. Or they will say, no, we haven't. And I said, I'm so happy you haven't set a date. I affirm that, because it means that they're putting the priority in the right place. They're allowing themselves enough time to go through the process and be able to benefit from the process and make meaningful decisions as a result of the process. If their minds are all made up and the dates are set and halls are reserved and guests are invited and they come in there at the last minute, it's okay, tell us. Okay, we'll go through the motion, but there's nothing that you're going to tell them in the process that will change their mind or let them delay the process. They will just go right
Yeah.
Great. Dr. Fox.
Yeah, so agreed. I mean, therapists are not necessarily marriage officers. Most of them are not. Pastors are. And we feel, to some extent, we're given the responsibility to be custodians of marriage in a sense. and I think we see often people come and they want to get married in 2 weeks. That feels like a rush situation. And I know that they're not going to hear me. They're not going to hear anybody. I mean, it doesn't matter what happens. After you have invested so much money in a dress, I mean, which costs as much as your parents' first house, and you reserve St. Paul's Cathedral with 20 horses and for out-of-town guests and stuff, you're really not prepared to hear what anybody is saying to you.
That's true.
So they're not going to turn back on their decision, and therefore this is just a perfunctory experience that would have very little sense associated with it, except that they're using up your time, which is okay, but it is perhaps unnecessary. It is better when you see, it's a communication thing. When people are moving toward one another at the speed of light, by the same token, they're moving away from other people.
Oh, okay.
So you don't hear, people only hear you when they're moving toward you. When they're moving toward each other, they don't hear anybody. So that is not the best indication for counseling. It doesn't work. It's almost like somebody coming to counseling drunk. Their minds are so distracted or shut down that they're not going to benefit from the experience. So coming back to Sister Vanessa's challenge, it should be discussed. Pastor Bulgin said it early enough, but not too late, because they must know. I mean, if this person doesn't want children and the other one, then maybe it doesn't make sense going along with it, except somebody's trying to convince somebody, which really doesn't work, I have found out, because they would want the children still. So they will get married, but they will be unhappy, and they will prod you until you try and give it up. Basically, not always the case, but a lot of times that is the case.
So we have to, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
But I mean, I would say doing it too early is speaking to the same issue I raised, but doing it before you set a date, as Pastor Bulgin is saying, is crucial. And the educator, and sometimes I say the pre-marriage educator or the pre-marriage therapist or counselor should help them to think through those issues, because they are real issues and it should be discussed in depth, because these things will have significant effect on the marital satisfaction that you would experience thereafter. So it should be discussed.
So go ahead.
Yes, I agree with Dr. Fox wholeheartedly. But if I'm correct, one of the objectives of this forum and the setting is for us to bring out issues that the church is not, not necessarily speaking about. And it is clear that we don't talk about issues like these. And it is quite obvious that in the church, we as a church, we don't encourage counseling before, say, engagement or before setting a date. Most times when most persons don't even know that there are pastors who are marriage officers or counselors. We don't know. People don't know. Nobody announces it. Nobody knows about it. And so people just go on with their life until it is 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and that is the time when somebody makes a revelation and say, oh, you can speak with XYZ because he's a marriage counselor and he'll help you sort things through. Or when the date is set and it goes to the board and whatever, that's the time when, So we as a church need to create that scheme where people can know and understand that these services are being offered, so we can maximize on it.
Thank you much.
I agree. I was about to say that we need to get to a place where we not only have premarital counseling, but we need to do pre-engagement counseling. So when you are considering getting engaged to someone, that is when you sit down and have these conversations before you get engaged. And you discuss these things. And if you can come to an agreement, then you go ahead and get engaged. Then you have the premarital, maybe you can get into more detail in the premarital counseling. And I also wanted to add another layer, and I think Dr. Fox touched on it. When we're having these discussions, we need to be honest with ourselves. If you truly know that you want to have children and the other person does not, do not go into the relationship thinking you're going to change the person's mind or you're going to accidentally get pregnant. That has led to so many divorces. If you know that is what you want, trust God that He will send you someone who wants the same thing. But we need to be honest with ourselves when we're having these discussions. And if you know that you will not come to a compromise and you are just saying you'll come to a compromise, but thinking you'll do something different in the marriage, that is not Christ-like. So we need to be honest with ourselves and trust that God will send the right person. And if you realize that there's things that you're not compatible with, then just believe that God will send someone who you're compatible with and walk away. And there are times when it does work out because God is good and God is gracious, but let's not take those chances if we don't have to.
Well said, well said. And so what I'm gathering is that it is best for us to seek counsel at the time we figure that it's the two of us. We would like to move on from here to spend time together. We also agree to start counseling before getting engaged, making announcement, and sometimes excitement run away with some of us. You know, we are so excited to get the ring on and, you know, show our friends, oh, I'm doing it, you know. And sometimes there are some of us who are guilty too of pushing people to get things going, you know, but we are to be respectful of the process and allow the persons to make their own, allow them to use their own judgment. I'm going to jump now into a different area. Last week, because we have just about 28 minutes, and we still would like to take any questions that will be having the forum. No, last week red flags were raised. I mean, we spoke about red flags, and there are times when you see things or you know something about the individual, you're picking up some messages, some signals, but you're so blinded by emotion. You know, I can manage it. We can change. I can change him. I can be his counselor or her counselor and so forth. And I've seen such situations ending in divorce, separation, you know, bitterness for individuals. Now, some red flags that we are going to look at, and what I'd like to know is, how can they all right, let me take it this way. I'm going to outline some and then have you comment on it, Dr. Durant and anybody else in the forum. But I'll have Dr. Durant as our psychologist come in on this. There are persons who have attitudes and behaviors and expectations that they're carrying over from past relationships. How do we address that? What can you do? For example, do you find a situation where someone is being compared to somebody? What can we expect from such a situation?
That does happen a lot, but it shouldn't. When you start a new relationship, that is a new relationship. And you don't bring what we like to call baggage into this new relationship. Let this new relationship plays itself out. So don't go saying, oh, this is how it's happened to me. So you go and try to find it in this relationship. And that is easier said than done, because we are human and we are conditioned to see things that way, especially if it has happened to us over and over and we've been hurt and you don't want to be hurt anymore. So you're trying to protect yourself. So you're kind of looking and trying to see, but we need to get to a place where we have to allow each relationship to be its own, stand on its own, and not bring past relationships into it if there's no need for it. Maybe if there are red flags that you're seeing that you have noticed in other relationships, that's different. But there's some people there is no indication and they're just bringing what they have from other relationships into this one and putting it on the new person. And sometimes they're very accusing when the person has not done anything. But if you are seeing red flags, then communication is very important in all relationships. So if you are seeing red flag, that is when you take the time to sit and speak with the person. This is what I'm seeing and I might be wrong, but this is how I am perceiving this, and have a discussion about what you're feeling and how that is playing out in the relationship. But you don't just put something on that person because your ex did it, so you automatically think this person is going to do it. That is not fair to the other person.
Okay, I'm not able to see hands raised. So if you have something to say, you'll just, if anyone
Yeah.
else would like to
Okay.
comment, yes.
I'd like to add on to that is that before we're ready for a relationship, we need to process the old relationship. We need to have the issues in the prior relationship resolved, because if those issues are not resolved, no matter how you try, they will bleed into the new relationship. And that's why people who have gone through divorce and get remarried are more likely to be divorced again, because many times they have not processed, they have not worked through. And we're working against, particularly in our culture, we're working against the notion that if I cannot fix it, it cannot be fixed. We are very slow to go to professionals to help us work through our issues. We've been trained and nurtured that way. And so we keep on perpetuating that same stereotype. So those who are entering marriage, if you've been in relationships before, whether they be, and they've been negative, and let's say your heart has been broken, you need to make sure that that old relationship is no longer controlling you. And the way to do it is to go through therapy, talk about it, get it out there, have someone help you work through it. You don't learn to swim by standing on the bank of a river. You've got to get in the water. So let that professional walk you through the process, resolve the issue, get it out of your system, so you're now free and open to establish a new relationship.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Well said. And so sometimes we need to give ourselves time. And we ourselves, if we are coming from a past relationship, we should be able to recognize that we have these
baggages.
Yes, carrying over into this new one. And the persons whom we are seeing should also recognize it and decide, should they decide whether they want to wait on you to do therapy, or they will move on, or what? And that is entirely up to the individual, I would imagine. Dr. Fox?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We have other situations such as parental abuse or sexual abuse, and these often result in low self-esteem. This is another red flag. How do people, what do people with low self-esteem rather take into a relationship? What are the signs? Dr. Fox?
Well, I would say people with low self-esteem tend to be sensitive, if not ultra sensitive. They take things personally. They feel people are against them. They are not able to, sometimes we call it, soothe themselves. So they're always needing the other person to give them assurance. And that could make somebody present as needy and hard to comfort, if I may use that expression in this case. So that may be a red flag, but I want to say, with all the sensitivity with which I'm capable, we all have baggage. So this is not to denounce somebody with low self-esteem, but somebody who has low self-esteem may well process that issue, as Pastor Bolton was saying, with somebody, because if you go into the relationship with that, it will put a lot of strain on the relationship, and will make you perhaps sort of too demanding, and you would think that the other person is responsible for your well-being, which is really not the case. So you'll be struggling with issues that you don't need to. So with the relationship. So it would be better to process them. So we could all have issues that could lead to that, but we should have enough openness and willingness to process those issues with somebody and work them through. We may be able to do better with that if we deal with it in the context of a professional relationship. So that's what I would say. But yes, it would be a red flag in the sense that you would find yourself trying to manage a lot of issues that you don't really need to, and they may not necessarily be your issue, except that now it is, because this is what your partner is bringing. So you want to process that before.
Okay. Any of the singles would like to comment? Laguerre, would you?
The question was, what does baggage, could you rephrase the question again? What role does baggage play?
How do you work with someone with low self-esteem that might result from abuse? How do they present, and what can you do about it? Should a person try to live with it? Should you stand by and try to help this person? Or what do you do?
That's a good question. So when it comes down to low self-esteem, in my experience, presents differently based on who the person is. So some people that have low self-esteem are always putting themselves down, and you'll find it in their language. It's like, oh, I'm stupid or whatever. I'm just dumb, like whatever. And they'll just say it in passing, but they're putting themselves down in their language. There are other people that put others down because they have low self-esteem. So everyone else is being, no one else can get any word of affirmation from them. No one from them, gets praised or gets affirmed because they feel bad about themselves. And so that sort of negativity is externalized, where some people internalize it in the previous example. The extent to which someone can work with that person, it really just has to deal with your emotional package. Like for me personally, like Dr. Fox was saying, everyone is broken, right? We all have baggage. We're all messed up to some degree. So does it work? Does it fit? Are you still able to be at peace and in this relationship? For me, someone being kind is a big thing for me, right? So if that person externalized it and was negative in their words and their demeanor towards other people, that wouldn't work for me. I cannot go on that journey with that person. There are other people that I know where it's like they don't really take words as seriously. It's kind of like that's just who the person is, but the person is really meets another need in their lives that kind of compensates for the fact that they may be negative. And so it might work for that person. So you just kind of have to see whether it fits or not for you. But I don't think someone that has baggage is beyond, being in a relationship, because I think we all enter relationships with some sort of baggage.
However, as was, yes, Dr. Baldwin.
No, it's not Dr. Boyd, it's someone else.
Oh.
But yes, it is dependent on the level of self-esteem that you analyze in the person. If you think personally that you can handle it and you can help the person through it because it is simple, then you can attempt. But it's a very sensitive area, and sometimes when we try to take up sensitive things like these, we oftentimes do more harm than good. So in this situation, I personally would recommend that if it is very serious and it's really affecting the individual, that you recommend them to a counselor or a specialist that can help them get through it, but not personally take it up as a partner to say you will help them through it, because you may very well just do more harm than good.
Okay, that's to the extent that it puts a strain on the relationship. It's putting a strain on the other person. You might have to pass that person up and just be a friend to the person, probably make recommendations that they, get some counseling or ways in which they can build theirs on ways in which they can build their self-esteem.
And rather than telling, you might want to use the force of a question. Have you thought of?
Okay.
Because if someone is suffering from poor self-esteem, and you say you should see a counselor, you know, you are, you know, you could say, you know, I have noticed this. Have you thought about getting some help here in this area? When you do that, they can say, no, I really haven't thought about it, or they will tell you what their attitude is towards outside help. And if they're telling you that I don't value outside help, then that's a clear indication that no matter you can't help that person either, because they will, if they are averse to outside help, it also means that they're averse to your helping them. And two of you now become enmeshed in a situation where you're frustrated, that other person is unsatisfied, unhappy in the relationship because they're looking to you for something that you cannot provide. And we should always be mindful that if the person is unhappy with him or herself, they won't be happy with you either.
Okay. There is someone else with a comment.
Hi, good afternoon. Happy Sabbath.
Good afternoon.
Go ahead, please. If there is somebody that has gone through trauma and did not receive counseling, so as a result of that, they're not healed, that person should not go enter into any relationship at all, right? If you enter into a relationship with this individual and realize that, wow, this person is really looking for somebody to fix them, that is a trauma response, right? Step back, be their friend. And you also have the individuals, a trauma response where we try to fix others in order for ourselves to feel good, right? So we might have gone through something that we are not aware of, but it's there in the brain, right? So we realize that we are more attracted to, we have been attracting persons that have some amount of problems, have some amount of self-esteem issues, some self-worth problems, because of whatever trauma we face, we have this thing within us that we want to fix the next person. But guess what? The moment you fix the next person and the project is finished, that's where the relationship is finished, and you are left more broken than the other person, right? Marriage is a very serious matter, and these things are things that you must discuss before you. Lady said pre-engagement, but I believe what they do it before you're engaged or after you're engaged. It's called premarital counseling because it's before you get married. Individuals need to be very open with the person that their friend. So you ensure that you are friends first and be very open. And if you realize that there's something, do not, please, Jesus is our burden bearer. Do not try and bear anybody's burden, especially when it comes down to persons that have gone through trauma. Be their support system, because guess what? If you're in a relationship, that just might mix up the thoughts, and the person might just be getting help because they want to get married to you, but not because they see a real need to get help and to receive healing.
Yes, Camille, sound advice. Yes.
If I could add to that, like that's so true. Like someone who's hurt and is in a relationship or entering a relationship with someone that's more or less on a journey of growth and healing, if I were to do that, I'm setting myself up to be hurt by this person, because the closer someone is to you, the more their words, their actions, their attitudes, their demeanor, all those things affect you deeper. My wife's attitude is going to affect me more than anyone else. So there's this book called 10 Stupid Things Men Do to Mess Up Their Lives by Dr. Laura Schlesinger. I believe the first chapter in there is called Stupid Chivalry. And as men, we often have the desire to want to fix women. We want to go save our woman in the castle. So when we see people, I'm talking as a man, so I'm going to say women, not that women are more broken than men, but as a man, I'm looking at women. And if I see a woman, sometimes my instinct is, oh, I can fix her, right? And I'm the choleric melancholic personality wise. So I'm sort of, go for it, whatever. But you can't really, it's not A squared plus B squared equals C squared when it comes to people and their lives. And so unless someone wants to, and someone made a comment here, if someone is teachable and changeable, should I stick with them? If someone is truly teachable and changeable, I want to find you on that path of growing and being like, I don't want to be the catalyst, because ultimately I'll never know whether you're doing it for me or if you're doing it because you have a desire within your own heart to change. And the thing about brokenness is that it has to manifest itself. It's like a rotten apple. It's gonna spoil everything around it. And so when someone has low self-esteem, even from a biblical standpoint, the Bible says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. That person cannot even fully love other people because they don't fully love themselves. And so that's going to show up in some way or another that I'm going to see as her husband. And so it's just, it could be toxic. It could go bad. So going back to what the sister said before, yeah, if someone has that low of a self-esteem, then it's better just to leave it alone. Yeah.
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
We're basically though out of time, and we have 7 minutes remaining. Sister Spence, you probably want to be mindful of that. You know, there's a whole lot more that we could say.
To the last section now. I just need for Dr. Durant to give us some pointers as to how we can identify persons who might be abusive, persons who might be a user, a person who might be a user. In other words, you are looking for a serious relationship where someone, you're considering someone, you're attracted to somebody. Unfortunately, that person might be an abuser, a user. The person could be overly jealous. And there's another one that I would like you to look at, and or pastors may do that too. How do you identify when a person has a lost interest? But we'll deal with an abuser and a user first. Dr. Duran, how can we identify them? What are the indicators?
Okay, I'll try to make this as brief as possible. And some of these do overlap. So an abuser, somebody who might get angry very easily, somebody who is very controlling. They like to keep you isolated from family and friends, but that also overlaps with someone who might be jealous, because somebody who is an abuser might be extremely jealous as well. When you're jealous, you also try to isolate the person from friends and family, always checking up on them, calling to see where they are, checking their phones. And that is also an indicator that the person might also be abusive. So there's a bit of overlapping going there. So just someone who's controlling, tries to isolate you, gets angry easily. And then when it comes to a user, someone who is selfish, they don't compromise in the relationship. It's always what they want to do, simple things, always maybe just what movie they want to watch, what restaurant they want to eat at. They're always asking you for a favor, and that is not reciprocated when you need a favor. It's always what you can do for them, and they're not offering what they can do for you. And lastly, if someone is not interested, one of the big red flags that someone is no longer interested is when they're no longer willing to work at the relationship. Like they have checked out. So even in terms of having disagreements or having conflict, they are not even willing to invest in working through a conflict anymore. They're just done. They are not even engaging in that conflict. They have checked out, and they have put their hands up, and they're not even willing to argue. When you get to that place where they're not even willing to engage in a conflict to resolve it, then you know they're not interested anymore. They don't care where this relationship goes. They have checked out. And the others can add.
Yes. Any other comment? Thank you so much. Very good points. What about the phone calls? You are doing all the calling. You are making all the advances, especially in the case of the woman. Then she can end up embarrassing herself. I've seen this happen, you know. So it is very important that we identify when persons have checked out, as well as when persons are abusive. And there are women who sometimes, for some reason, they just keep attracting these people to themselves. What would you counsel such women to do? Those who keep attracting, they do about it.
Right. So that there's something they need to look at too. So
yes.
There's a lady, I've been coaching her for years, but she seems every time to get back into that same situation. So in one case, she met this guy. It's about a year after. He hasn't told her where he lives yet. She had at that time a beeper number so she could call him on one of his jobs. She did show up at one of the jobs, and there was a lady sitting there, and the lady wanted to know, well, who are you and why are you here? She didn't know the relationship that existed between them. But he said he was working really hard to make a life for them. How come you don't call me? So sometimes a week after, how come you don't call me? And I'm out there working so hard. Babes, I'm coming over there. So he'd come, of course, 11 o'clock in the night. Like a vampire, he leaves 2-3 hours after. And where is he going? I mean, So one day she said he's doing a big break now, financial breakthrough for them so that they can have a life for their, and he needed $7,000 to do this deal, and he needed some money. So she gave him the $7,000. He said, what can I do with that? She needs cash. She cashed it. She gave it to him. And then he wouldn't call again and chided her for not calling. And then he showed up again and he needed $7,000 more. This is it. This is the big break. She gave it to him. And a few weeks after, she saw him on television in Judge Joe Brown's courtroom. And he did the same thing to a woman, her boyfriend, whose address she did not know. But if people do that stuff again and again, you got to listen to what people are saying. If he comes to you 11 o'clock in the night and leaves at 2, he's a vampire, and you should free him to his own destiny and pursue your own.
Okay. Yes. So, Kadeen, does that answer your question? Persons who have, unfortunately, a history of dating abusers or users? All right. There is a question here, but Andrea, there's going to be a session dealing with divorce and remarriage. So that's a topic that you can zero in for this question you have on adultery. All right. What Claudette asked, so I didn't know about these red flags. What if I am getting married next month? What guide do you have for me? I see these red flags. I have it all planned to get married next month. What do I do now?
Break off the engagement and sort that out before you walk down the aisle. Don't be embarrassed. It's okay. Someone mentioned this last week. Ellen White said, if you're walking down the aisle and you recognize that this isn't right, to walk away. Don't feel embarrassed. A lot of people go through it because they don't want to be embarrassed. It is better to sort that out than to try to not embarrass yourself and get into something that can potentially take your life. This is serious.
Okay, thank you. And Rena is asking, can couples of the same faith be unequally yoked? Pastor Bulgin?
Yes. You want more than yes?
Maybe some examples would help someone who is listening.
I'll use a simple analogy to illustrate the point I'm making.
Yes.
Let's say that you are deeply committed to Sabbath school. And Sabbath school is a must for you. It's high on your priority list because you like the engagement and the back and forth that goes on in Sabbath school. You get connected with someone who barely makes it for the preaching service at 11. Get married to that person. Either you will be going to Sabbath school all by yourself, and he'll be tagging, or she'll be tagging along later, or you'll have to abandon your love for Sabbath school so that you can get in there with that person at a 11:45, just before the preacher gets up to preach. So in that case, you begin to see that there is a disparity in your level of commitment to an essential part of who we are as Seventh-day Adventists. Most Sabbath schools that in my circle are low attended, but there are some people who will not miss Sabbath school for anything. And so that is, it might seem simple, but is an example of the possibility of lack of levels of commitment, vast differences in in commitment. For another example, you are ruggedly committed to tithe and offering, and you're marrying to someone who just threw a couple of dollars in the plate and never tithe. When you get married and you want to continue that practice in your life, it's going to be conflict, because that person is going to be challenging you. Why are you giving so much money to the church? And you now have to make a decision. What do I do? Do I side with my mate here and stop what I'm doing, or do I continue and endure the taunting and the challenge every time I do it? So yes, you are a member of the same faith, but your levels of commitment can be so wide apart that it would be easier for you to find somebody that is closer to you in levels of commitment. That's an example of my yes.
Thank you. Dr. Fox, any comment on that area?
I fully agree. I fully agree. The values are crucial, and they show up when you're dating and it's all hot and sweaty even. Those things are insignificant, but in reality they are. And if you have a high church view or high church affiliation, somebody with a low level affiliation will annoy the mess out of you not long. Because, for example, I think church is a hot date. If my wife don't go to church with me, or if I have to prod her to go to church with me and on time, I wouldn't feel good about it. There's no way I would feel good about it. So the values are crucial. And we have to think about the long-term playing out of those values, not just when you're excited in a new relationship. There are lots of things that this person may or may not like. If you're a Seventh-day Adventist and somebody smokes, you wouldn't countenance that well at all. But if that same Seventh-day Adventist guy kind of smokes some, stuff every now and then, you could never feel happy about that. Yeah, you would think that you made a mistake. And the truth is, at that time, you may be locked into a marriage. And I would tell you, my view of the marriage at that time will be different from my view of courtship. That's why we have these programs. Because then you were deciding, Dr. Bulgin is saying, from a pool of people. But after you decide, you take what you get and you get what you take.
Okay, thank you. And Norma had asked, what is incompatibility? I'm sure that these responses should help you, Norma, to understand, or whoever you're asking this on behalf of, that it should clarify what helps to make up incompatibility, because persons really need to have shared values. Excuse me, family values and celebration and academic climb is high on your agenda and the other partner isn't. That is also something that can bring about a problem. Okay, now we have to stop here for now, but I do have a bonus question for all the persons who are viewing, and the two pastors are in the hot spot. And what I'm going to ask you, Pastor Bulgin and Dr. Fox, we would like each of you to tell us what was the wow that drew you to your wives. What was the attraction that drew you to your wives? What was the attraction to these ladies?
What attracted me to my wife was the fact that she loved the church, loved participating in church. She was humble. She treated, she listened, and she connected.
Okay. Okay. So there was connection from the start. Okay. All right. And Dr. Fox?
Yeah. When I when I met I was like, I wasn't looking. So I wasn't looking, and she would say she wasn't looking either. We were looking. She believes just what I believe. You don't have these conversations too early and stuff. So she was just minding her own business. I met her. Somebody told me to reach out to her when I get to California. She would have been there. And foolish me, I went looking for her. So just to say hello. And there you go. I found that she was a wonderful, simple, humble person. I like that. I like quiet people. I don't like rowdy, rambunctious kind of, and she was just quiet, humble, simple. I say my wife would live with me in a hotel room if I need to. That's the kind of person she is. She that level of humility and her love for church and her God, I mean, it's crucial. The first time I have to say this. So I bought this house, and I am going to furnish my house. And I told her, I said, look, I'm going to buy some furniture. If you don't mind, if you could come with me. I mean, a fresh pair of eyes. On a Wednesday evening, the pastor said this to a young lady who he's starting to like a little bit. You know what she told me? No. She has to go to prayer meeting.
Amen.
Look, you wouldn't believe.
Amen.
A ton of bricks. I'm thinking, I am the pastor here. Turning me down to go to prayer meeting. I mean, that hit me all upside my head. And that to me spoke volumes about the sister that I met, whose name is Paula. Awesome, humble, simple woman. And that's all she is, and that's all she cares to be. And that is still, I think, something that is very attractive to me. But she is.
Amen. Great. And Pastor Bulgin, you have been married for 42 years. What about you, Dr. Fox?
18.
You mind sharing? Pardon?
18.
Yes.
Okay, great. And I would like to congratulate you two gentlemen. And I'm
60 years of
sure
experience there.
60 years of experience. Great. Perfect. Yes, more than half a century. And we have really benefited from your counsels, Dr. Durant. We really appreciate your being here today. And I hope that this has been an eye-opener for many, because I know that when I was younger, I didn't have all this information, but God has been gracious to Brother Spence and me, and we are thankful for that. I would also like to thank Brother Laguerre and Sister Vanessa and Brother, wow. I'm showing how long I've been married for. I'm missing off your name. And Brother Parks. We'd like to thank you very much for your participation. You have contributed greatly to this discussion. Also, our viewers, we thank you for zeroing in, and we hope that you are blessed. We hope you are in a position to help your friends, help your children, help yourselves. And I'm going to close off this segment with the quotation that one of our panelists last week made, because it made an impression on me. He quoted from Sister White, Adventist Home, that's Pastor Fletcher. Adventist Home, page 45, paragraph 2. Examine carefully to see if your married life would be happy or inharmonious and wretched. Let the questions be raised. Will this union help me heavenward? Will it increase my love for God? And will it enlarge my sphere of usefulness in this life? If these reflections present no drawback, then in the fear of God, move forward. And as we move forward in this aspect of our lives, I pray that the persons who are not yet married will pay keen attention to the messages given in Messages to Young People, as well as the Adventist Home, and also the Passionate Marriage by David Schnack. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Dr. Fox. And I am sure that there are other materials there that we can use that will assist us. The time is gone. I'm going to turn over now. Thanks again, everyone. May God bless you in your ministry and in your search for life partner. And I turn over to Brother Spence. Brother Spence. Oh, well, Dr. Bolgen, will you take up from there, please?
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate that you're facilitating this discussion this evening. You've done a wonderful job. We look forward to having you join us again on next week. Next week we will look at marriage, divorce, and remarriage. It's going to be a challenging subject, but I know that you will be blessed as a result of that. So God bless you. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on next week. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for guiding us through this time of sharing. We pray your blessing on each one of us as we go. May we be blessed in our going out and in our coming in from this day forward, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.